Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I'm going to preface today's forecast with a statement about the way I'm feeling about it, and that is, I think that this upcoming forecast has what we call a high failure mode. In other words, there are so many different moving pieces in this forecast that should they not line up the way that the latest model runs have suggested, it will deviate greatly from what I'm about to share with you. And I think we just start off with a look here at some satellite imagery. Maybe the most important piece of this entire pattern and its setup is actually not even seen on this animation. You're probably drawn here to the deep cutoff low that's moving through Michigan today, producing some extremely strong winds in and around Michigan, including here on the Great Lakes nearby. You might also be looking here in parts of California where we have very widespread wildfire smoke spreading over parts of Southern California. But the thing that I really want to be watching most carefully is actually just barely seeing the tail end of it right here. It's a low that's moving in through parts of northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And what's going to end up happening is that low is going to interact with this one that you see here over the coming days. And the two of them, as they pivot around one another, are going to be critical to eventually how a trough ridge system sets up across much of North America. So those are the pieces that we're going to watch. Now, first of all, this cutoff low that's just slowly meandered through parts of the eastern Corn Belt has produced quite a bit of heavy precipitation just in the last 3 days. And that's what you're looking at here, the last 72 hours worth of total accumulated precipitation. Note that parts of the East Coast, from South Carolina clear up to this part of New York, there are pockets in here that have received in excess of 6 inches of rainfall. And then in parts of coming out of Kentucky, but into Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and then this part of Ontario also having seen several inches of rainfall, and it's still coming down out of this system. It'll be interesting to see how this recent precipitation gets integrated into this map, which shows you month-to-date total accumulated precipitation through yesterday. This is through yesterday morning on the 22nd. My eye is kind of drawn to a few areas. Of course, we've watched this area remain very wet throughout this month, but also very dry in and around the Red River Valley. In fact, most of Texas has been quite dry. We've had a pocket into the Corn Belt, this region into here, that's only had brief showers and storms. Some of those storms did produce some strong straight line winds earlier that have come through there. But overall, it's been drier in this region. And the question is, are we going to continue to see better harvest weather coming up? So what I'm going to do at the end of this video is give you the long range, and I'm going to compare it to a year ago and talk about some of the forecast skill issues we may be having. So we'll get to that in just a few moments. We did have released this morning the latest drought monitor, and some of the changes in the drought monitor have been seen right down here in parts of the south, mid-south, and then also in the southern plains where we have continued to see some regional drought development here. And again, that's an area, when we just look back over the last month, that's really missed out on a lot of this precipitation. Now, there is rain coming to this area, and what it's going to take is a high pressure cell, after all I'm about ready to share with you kind of gets going, that's going to move over this region and just start to draw moisture up out of the Gulf of Mexico and kind of fill in this area through the high plains with rainfall. Not tropical. This isn't a tropical system. It's something a little different than that. But that's really going to start to help kind of work away on the drier soils that are in place there. So this is our latest 40 centimeter or 16-inch soil moisture profile. And it's in percent, soil moisture percentile. And what I want you to notice is how wet things are here versus how dry they've been in this pocket of the Corn Belt and throughout the plains. So I think we're going to see some pretty sizable changes to this map here coming up very soon. And I want to tell you where I'm expecting those changes. So let's start with the winds again. And this is how things are shaping up this afternoon. Here's our cutoff low over parts of Michigan. And the winds have been pretty ferocious around this. And of course, as they go over the lakes having lower friction coefficient than land, the winds really start to pick up. And there's been a lot of coastal flooding with this. We can already start to see the southerly winds building right back up here. That's going to return some warmth. But here's the low that I'm going to be watching most carefully. Because in the near term, this is going to bring a front like this Friday into Saturday across the Midwest, upper Midwest, and parts of the Corn Belt. And with it, some showers. But it's what ends up happening, with this low and this one as we progress forward. And also what's going on in the tropics and in the Gulf of Alaska that all have to work together in time to make this all occur. Now, what's going on in the tropics? Well, first of all, we do have a front that's already made it way down here into the Gulf. In fact, I should have showed you this. It's kind of neat. We did see Look at these cloud streets that set up on the colder air that's moving across the Gulf of Mexico today. Well, anyway, that front that's made it all the way down here is important to know about, because should another front be timed with the next system I'm concerned about, it'd be good for that to occur to keep that system away from North America. That's what these fronts in fall do. But we're still watching a few different circulations. This is what was left over from Peter. This is what's left over from Rose. But this is the low that I want to watch most carefully. Where it's going over the next few days as it heads toward the Lesser Antilles, which are these islands here, could very easily intensify. The conditions are quite favorable. It's named Tropical Storm Sam, and they got that name for it this afternoon, and it's expected to strengthen to a hurricane by tomorrow and then become a major hurricane late in the weekend into early next week. You do notice that from today on Thursday to next Tuesday, it's not moving too far. The steering current winds here are not overly fast, and it's going to be the timing of this system that's going to be most critical. Now, the latest updates from the European model, which were just released with the 12Z run, are shown here. And what I'm most concerned about is how far to the south of this track the storm ends up going. Does it, once it gets to the Lesser Antilles, prefer this route? Or does it follow the ensemble average, which would take it somewhere in this vicinity? Or does it even curl farther to the north earlier? The most preferred modes are these two, keeping this thing away from the east coast of the United States. But I want to make a point that any of these is possible at this particular stage. Now I'm going to come back to this and show you why I'm maybe overly concerned at this point about this tropical system in just a few moments. But I want to do a quick reminder about where we currently sit in the hurricane season. We are in the second half, and these three maps show you the first 10 days, the middle 10 days, and the last 10 days of October. And what I want to remind everybody is that as we approach the month of October, the frequency of what I call homegrown tropical systems, those forming in this part of the Atlantic, the Caribbean, or the Gulf, it just increases this time of year. And we see less of these systems coming off of the main development region out here in the open Atlantic. So that's the transition we often see this time of year. So we're going to watch for conducive conditions close to home. Now, to see all of this kind of interacting, I'm going to show you a couple of different forecast maps here. Let's start with the first two pieces, which I think are the most predictable. We have the upper level low that's moving through Michigan and into Ontario today. So this is through tonight at 10 p.m. And as we get out here to early tomorrow morning, we now see the front from the second system. So by tomorrow morning, the lead system produces its heavier rainfall through New York, and it's moving a bit offshore here. There's still going to be more scattered showers in this area extending into Ontario. Then, throughout the day on Friday, we're going to watch the next front. This is Friday at noon, coming through this section of the Corn Belt. So that's Friday at noon, according to the NAM model. And then we see by evening, that front will be somewhere in Wisconsin, stretching into Iowa, but it's going to break up farther south we go. And even into the overnight hours, while we could get some storms forming on this, the likelihood of that occurring is a bit more limited given its position around the deeper low that's moving here into Ontario. Now remember, this is the second low, the one that was back up in parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. By Friday night, it's moving, well, the front's coming through Illinois, going to Indiana, and back over to Michigan, where we're going to put down more precipitation in an area that just got, clobbered with heavy rain in the last 3 or 4 days. And then that front progresses farther to the east, and I'll take you all the way out to Saturday evening. Now, the position of that low is here. The cutoff low is off the screen way over here. And what's going to happen next is the interaction between those two systems producing what is going to be set up as our height pattern, the jet stream pattern, the trough ridge pattern, into next week. So I want to show you both models. These are operational runs, 12Z today. So here's the two systems we're watching. That's the wave in the back, here's the wave in the front, and it's in both models right now. They're both initialized with almost identical positions. Now with time going from Thursday into Friday and Saturday, you can see that the wave in the back dives down. It then kicks the wave out ahead of it farther to the north. That's just because the flow comes around these short waves like this. Now the models still have a relatively similar view on these two waves, but watch how things start to change once we get into the weekend. Here we are by Saturday afternoon. Let's just take the sun out to Sunday morning. Now, the GFS has almost two parts to the wave. There's a southern component and here's the northern component. The Europeans keeping everything kind of balled up a little tighter. And what ends up happening on Sunday going into Monday is that the European and the GFS take on a little bit different characteristic. Let me show you the GFS. Monday, 7 p.m. The low that you see here was the one that started there. So it went down and curled around. This wave right there is the cutoff that is over Michigan today. It gets brought up and pulled around like this. In the European model, the two are not as distinguishable. Do you notice that? And that's important to see because as we go forward, this is Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. This is SAM. And both models have it strengthening and somewhere here just north of the Lesser Antilles. Now, this is where the differences I think are most important because going out next week, large ridge builds in the midsection of the country in different places, slightly different places, European versus the GFS. And then notice in the west, while this wave looks similar, the GFS has got the wave there and the Europeans almost cut it off over Southern California. Now here we are, just 6 days out in the forecast. We have a much different scenario in the forecast models. Now this is where I think things get most important and the high failure mode is in place. You see, looking out here, this is a week forecast. We're all the way up to next Thursday morning. And the GFS has a broad trough through the Great Basin all the way down to the Baja. European's got a cutoff there. European has a highly amplified high over low setup. So there's the ridge with a trough to the south. The GFS doesn't. It's got the ridge here and the downstream trough. Now, why am I laboring over all of this? Well, the difference is in where that tropical system goes. And I believe that when you see such highly amplified patterns in the models out beyond week 1, the chances of a wave break, the chances of a displacement of a trough, the chances of this being wrong just increases dramatically. And this is where I want to get. Now, GFS, this is Friday, October the 1st. Bigger trough here. You know what that is? That came from here, which came from here and here. That is the combination of the two systems we're watching today. In the European, it's right there. Now let's circle them again. At this point, the trough in the GFS is kind of protecting Cape Hatteras. The trough in the European is sitting over Georgia. There's a ridge here in the GFS and a ridge there in the European. Now, why am I pointing these things out? The flow will come around this ridge like that. The flow will come around the trough just like this. And that'll take whatever is going on with SAM and target it right in between the two. Here, the ridge flow is coming around like this. There's the trough, and it's going to take this and push it farther to the north. And the difference is everything in the trajectory of what could be a powerful tropical system in SAM. And that's why we spent so much time talking about this. One of it puts the United States into play. That's the European. The GFS knocks it out with that bowling ball right there. And behind it, all of this big ridge, if that doesn't form, or even, if we just go back here and this wave ejects sooner, this ridge is gone, all of this changes, and the whole pattern will be completely different when we talk about it next week. I would actually prepare for that more than anything else. But let's see what it does. Over the next 7 days, this is the European model's precipitation compared to normal. We're drier from parts of the eastern cotton belt through the Midwest, and we're going to start to watch precipitation return to the southern and high plains. I'll show you that in a few moments. Deeper trough does most certainly come into the Pacific Northwest, though, returning some more moisture there. From there, what does the GFS say? Well, honestly, there's the European, there's the GFS. In terms of precip just through the next 7 days, we're okay. Models are actually in pretty good agreement. But let's put them side by side and do a little bit more analysis. Ready? All right, we've already seen through Saturday. So why don't we just get out to Sunday morning? From Sunday morning through Sunday afternoon and evening, now progressing through the day on Monday, what we see is higher pressure takes over in the midsection of the country. A deep coastal low comes into the Pacific Northwest. There it is early next week. And what ends up occurring is higher pressure begins to build in this area in both models. Let me show you. Monday into Tuesday and out there into Wednesday and Thursday. You see the higher pressure in control in this area. It's in both models, a little bit different placement. Opens up the Gulf to return Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, more moisture and the potential for showers and storms in this area. It's in both models. There's even another coastal low in both models hitting British Columbia. But it's after that, remember, that we start to see the deviations. So where do they begin to show up? Well, the Europeans wetter in the southeast. Both models still continue to bring storms up through the central plains. It's not the soaking rains, but it's certainly storms. And what I want to get to at the end is right here. This is where the European puts Sam. This is where the GFS puts Sam. Now you see why I'm so, set on seeing these differences, because the differences could be critical for the East Coast, and that's what I'm going to be watching. Now, I'm not saying any of this to raise the alarm. I'm not trying to pull any hype into this. I'm not trying to get people worried. I'm just trying to explain some meteorology here and the stuff I'm going to be watching all weekend. Okay, now, what about week 2? All of that seems to be washed out when looking out there at day 10 from the European. It still favors this deeper trough in the west and broad ridging here. But you can see the trough in place and the secondary high sitting over here and also over there. What we end up getting out of this pattern is drier conditions here. The moisture comes around that high into the southern plains, and better chances of moisture return into the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. That's the week 2 precipitation pattern. Now, we've got the next 15 days kind of hammered out here in terms of precip, at least the best kind of prognosis we can give you based upon our current observations. Let's talk temperatures, and then we'll go long term. Just a reminder, as we enter October, I compared the difference between the 1st of October and the 31st of October. I want to remind everybody before you look at this temperature forecast that October is a transition month. We expect by the end of the month, for example in Iowa, for the temperatures to be on average 18 degrees Fahrenheit colder than what we start with. That's average. So what are we going to start with? Well, here's today's highest temperatures. We've already seen this. Let's now go into Friday. Now remember, we have the front coming through here first, so some warmth out ahead of it, still cool in the southeast, warming up again on the west coast. This is Friday. Going into Saturday, the front slides through, the ridge begins to build in the west. So by Sunday, into Monday and Tuesday, major rebound in temperatures as that ridge develops. But you saw the trough off the coast. So now we're talking about 70s in the Central Valley, 60s in the Pacific Northwest, and that carries through into Wednesday as well. So here's that highly amplified pattern. If you want a reminder, it's doing something like this with some sort of trough cutting down into this direction. So if we then take that and say, well, what about day 5 through 10? Look at the interesting behavior of the much above average temperatures here. It's kind of interesting. I just almost traced out the outline of a supercell, but that's not what this is, of course. This is what happens when you bring in a highly amplified pattern. You have much above average temperatures tucked in between two troughs flanking the United States. And by day 10 through 15, the models continue to wash that out. They're generally favoring above normal temperatures here, but they've washed out any of the details. So, given all of that, I want to take you back to a year ago, because by the time we get to that day 10 through 15 forecast, we're firmly into October. And October a year ago favored a big ridge just here in the Gulf of Alaska and a broad trough that was anchored over the Hudson Bay in this general vicinity. And what that gave us was this temperature pattern. You see, several of the upper Midwest and northern plains states here were having a top 10 coldest October on record, while we were hot in the southeast and we were hot in the southwest. That's what that pattern gave us. That deep trough in through here kept things quite cool. And then along the edges of that trough, look at where we had all of our excess precipitation. It was in this area that it was wetter than normal. We had some heavier rains that came through central Wisconsin and Michigan. It was also wet in Montana, but drier in the southwest, drier in southern Texas. Now, why I'm showing you this is because the latest long-range update looks nothing like a year ago. They're trying to project here, according to the European model, more troughing off the west coast and broader ridging across the rest of the United States. Now, if that looks familiar, it's because it's the exact same pattern we're seeing at day 10. The models are continuing to push this pattern down the road. So what you end up getting is a 30-day precip forecast that favors wetter conditions in through here, better onshore flow in the west, but drier in this area. Now for folks that are trying to dry out here and do some harvest, this is going to be good overall. Texas needs a little moisture to come back in, but this will slow harvest of cotton and other crops down here in the south. But this is only going to be coming on scattered precip. And I would be more than happy to see an abundance of moisture coming in early to the western part of the United States. But this is the model continuing to kind of kick the can down the road, as I said last week, or on Monday this week, sorry, just being persistent with its forecast. I've looked at the MJO, I've looked at all the teleconnections, and I'm just going to say the same thing I said on Monday. Nothing is adding up to give us any clarity, which is why the models are hung up on persistence. What I can tell you is they are not looking at all like they did a year ago for October. So expect a different October. What is the only thing that we can really report, I think, well on? Well, when you look at this region here, out in the Pacific Ocean, we're right in through this area, the trade winds over the next 15 days remain strong. The Southern Oscillation Index is positive. It's at a value of about 10 to 11, which means we're firmly in La Nina territory. And what I want to show you then is what our current ocean temperatures look like. Now, I've been getting asked a lot of questions. How does this La Nina compare to a year ago? Now, this is anecdotal, but my general consensus here is that it's about half strength. This is what the ocean temperatures look like last year. Much different scenario. The current year, last year, which makes me say that to rely on La Nina for both our North and South American forecasting moving forward, this year compared to a year ago, well, let's just draw that on this year. I do not see the same situation setting up in October or November or even early winter. I think it's going to be a different scenario this year that's largely going to be forming on the North Pacific jet stream rather than the teleconnection out of the tropics. I'll watch it carefully, keep reporting back to you so we can stay ahead of it. Appreciate your attention today. Thank you.